Right, I reckon, guys, we've got 20 minutes to crack through not a small amount of material, so let's get going. So, welcome to the Prodev Habits every citizen developer should cultivate. I'll leave it to your learned opinions as to which side of that I currently sit on. But as a very quick introduction to myself, so I've got a bit of more of a background in classical music than traditional software development. But yeah, my sort of path into the Power Platform, worked as an international op singer, and then sort of moved into biz apps via recruitment, went along the certification journey. I think it's around 13 at the moment. And yeah, most recently run met Lloyd, met Laura. That's all right, come on in. Welcome. No? Right. Also run the Power Platform Academy community group. So it's kind of like designed to support community learning with, yes, lectures, but also hands-on labs. I'm kind of trying to extend, yes, we've got all of our wonderful stuff on Microsoft Learn, but how do we then go and apply that into the real world? That's kind of one of the main things. I really want to keep that going. I currently work for Cognizant Microsoft Business Group as a Power Platform consultant. If you haven't connected with me already on LinkedIn, do. I'm absolutely hilarious on there. So, also, obligatory thank you to everyone who's made this possible. Thank you to all these people who made this all possible. Right, let's crack into it. So, why am I here talking about this? Exactly what it says on the tin. So, it is the most incredibly exciting thing seeing people go on the journey of, I've never touched application development, I've never touched a data model in my life, and then all of a sudden they're starting putting controls onto a page and they're starting creating really meaningful applications. Fantastic stuff. But how do we then go from that sort of point, where we're in our own little personal productivity environment, we're doing really cool stuff for us, or it's like, for example, Lloyd might say, Sam, can you come and build me this app? Yes, we're going to go and step into his environment, I'm going to do all of that. But then how do we get to that point from a sort of quality control perspective, where we get that out into a wider audience? And this is the thing where, slightly unfairly I think sometimes, but in the world of sort of citizen development, of creating solutions that are maintainable, that they're scalable, that they're secure, these kind of steps forward, again, is perhaps where in Microsoft Learn, where we're going to learn about how to just get the thing working and get that sort of happy path working, isn't necessarily one of those things that is as well as easy to learn, and especially not as easy to learn on your own. So we're going to go through some of the things that I've picked up over the last couple of months on my sort of trajectory, and try and share those different learns. And actually, I asked Ben whether I could use this, and so this is a quote that I picked up, and it really sort of rang home to me about where we have this kind of like the pro-dev world, we have our citizen devs, and we've got perhaps our IT department, sort of like saying like, this is ungovernable, what are you guys building? And thinking about really where the value of professional development comes in, and what that actually is. And really I think actually Ben makes a really good point here, is like I'm not going to ask you to read all of it, but we get through to the quality steps developers do is to minimize complexity, great, ease maintenance, also good, and extension of applications, yeah? So what we're talking about here is that, obviously if we're creating a solution that's going to be around for a short period of time, excellent. Sometimes it's about getting something out the door, working for our end users, and we can sort of sort out the other stuff later, right? But in this enterprise level scale platform, where we can be building solutions that actually, I think we would hope that our solutions last more than a couple of months or a couple of years, that kind of thing is where we're talking about these steps that so for example, if we're creating our own little Canvas app and we're kind of going, it does everything that I wanted to do, excellent sort of stuff, would you really be confident someone else coming into that application after you've left the company is going to know what on earth it's doing? Yeah? Those kind of steps and kind of making what you're doing readable, repeatable, all of that kind of thing, again, isn't necessarily kind of the steps that we always see on Microsoft Learn. So I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about, just this kind of like, how do we as citizen developers move from that making something that works into something that A, works for a long period of time, and something that is, as we said, sustainable. So, this is it, isn't it? The Prodev Habits in a low-code world. And of course, we can talk about a professional developer learning the Power Platform. Excellent. The syntax is learnable. And then bringing in all of those ALM habits, all of those kind of things is excellent. But how do we then sort of flip that on the other side? Yeah? If we're not coming to application development from a traditional background, I can tell you that's been my journey into it, is then how do we then get those Prodev habits, which ones are useful to us in the Power Platform as it evolves? So for me, this is about striking a balance. Yeah. So we want to get our citizen devs, and we want to champion them, want to enable them in our organisation, and say to them, come in, have a go, yeah, and we can create something really interesting. However, getting to that point beyond I'm in my personal productivity environment, having a great old grand time, to then launching it out into the organisation, and it's I think Dave pointed out something quite funny in his session where. Was it someone who could tweet an opportunity?
Yeah, so they'd originally planned to send out a tweet whenever they won an opportunity in Dynamics. They did it whenever they created a new opportunity. So, yeah.
It's just like one of those things where for that person, I'm sure they really wanted to celebrate that they'd won a big opportunity with Aegeus, for example. Probably all their competitors didn't want that to happen, right? So it's these kind of quality control steps where we've gone from happy in our little environment to then how do we then become someone who's aware of what's going on around us. So my first thought on this is, and we're going to sort of frame a lot of this conversation around Canvas apps. So I think Canvas apps and Flow is really where most people start with the Power Platform. And just because we can spin up an application in 10 seconds, connect up to our SharePoint list, connect up to Dataverse, just start chucking controls on there, and just kind of, we get into this sort of, this process of constant refinement within the Maker portal, and you sort of get there eventually, but we're missing out a really, really key step here, right? Before we start messing around and we're actually thinking holistically about the whole solution. So I think whatever tools we have at our disposal, yeah, even if we're not in an organisation, we haven't got Visio to spin up or whatever it is, it's taking a step back and properly designing and thinking about how your solution is going to work. And again, this might not necessarily be, this is my happy path and it's all just going to work brilliantly. Starting to think about the possibilities of, if this happens, what? I haven't considered that, great. If this happens, then what? I didn't really consider that either. What if that happens? All these kind of scenarios that when we're just chucking things onto controls into a screen and then kind of going, reverse engineering what on earth you've done over that lifecycle process, this phase of design can be an absolute lifesaver, and it will improve your development skills overall anyway. Yeah? So you kind of need to be your own little mini solution architect. So, where does a good design start, right? You can see my excellent childlike drawing here for, we're just trying to tell you that an entity, we don't need to go straight into an enterprise level entity relationship diagram, yeah? But before you start connecting up to whatever data source you're working with, actually sitting down and going, right, I realistically need this data, I realistically need these tables, if I'm modeling the data, what kind of column types do I need to use, all of that sort of stuff. Start at this point, yeah? Get the things that you need sorted before you then start chucking things down, yeah? Data flow, right. I'm not talking about data flows in Power BI, I'm talking about the data flow within our Canvas app itself, right? And again, as we said, great, I've connected up to the data source, I'm happy as Lara, I'm doing exactly what I want. And in your personal productivity environment, again, probably not really going to cause many issues. But if we're thinking about a lean and efficient app that we're going to share with our wider organisation, what we don't want to be doing is calling an API every single time someone clicks on your button to filter a list of opportunities, for example. Yeah? And we're not going to get into the full kind of like, this is why we should use local collections and get things into local memory. But what I am suggesting that you do, and even this is another great childlike drawing, but actually mapping out the steps of what's happening with our data and our application. Yeah, as I said, it's all great, just kind of going, yeah, I'm connected, happy days. But realistically, what we want to be doing, so our app's going to be faster, people are going to enjoy using it more, it's going to be a lot quicker, is to then bring in only the data we need, shape it, do whatever we want to do with it, and then chuck it out at the end, patch it to your source. Yeah. But that's a really important step. It's going to make your app so much faster. And again, when you've got hopefully loads of people in your organization using it, you're not going to have your Power Platform admin coming to you and going, yeah, the kind of API limits are a bit of an issue for us with your application and what it's doing. So this is a really, really important step. They're going to love this. Right. Next step, wireframing. Right. So again, if we're working if I'm just creating an app for myself, yeah, would I necessarily take the trouble to wireframe all of my screens out for my Canvas app? It's probably not, right? But as soon as from a system developer perspective, when you're going from like, right, I'm going to go and work for my team, okay, we want this application to do X, Y, and Z. At that point, is it more efficient to put something together in your screen, go and play it to them and go, what do you guys think? Well, actually, I think if you move that over there, we would never use that and move that. All right, great, I'll go back and... What do you think of it now? Yeah, you still need to move that over there and do that. Okay, I'll go fix that, right? This step here of just putting together any kind of simple wireframe of what you're building, A, it will make your time so much more efficient when you do get into the Maker portal and start chucking things around, yeah? And also you're going to get some really real-time feedback. Yeah, and obviously, as we said, with this South Coast Summit session rater, yeah, we can all look at that and kind of go, actually, Sam, do you know all that? The gallery with the hearts next to it just looks a bit rubbish. Yeah, we need to make some changes with that. And that's great, because then I can go away, I haven't invested any time, I've just chucked on some pictures and we're already up and going. I think the red, I thought you might bring that up. I did thought that was my little cheeky one. Right. So following a naming convention, right? And this is something that, if you come from a professional dev background, you were just going to do this by instinct. But oh my word, even sort of there's people out in the community like Reza Durrani, Shane Young, and you watch all these great videos, you see the labels that are on there, and it's like label 1_5, label 7_7, global variable of just variable, for example. Yeah, the way that you name your stuff. It's not the exciting part of the platform, don't get me wrong, but as soon as you have more than one control on a form, and even if you're working on it constantly, all the time, and then you know what label 1.5 is doing behind the background, you know what that onSelect property does. Guess who doesn't? Anyone else, right? So follow a flipping naming convention. This is a really good starting point, the Todd Baginski and Pat Dunn white paper. And it will just give you a whole list of controls on how to name them. It will tell you how to comment against everything so that you're actually describing what you're doing to anyone else. So as I said, you're in your own little environment, you're having a great old time. Yeah? No one else is really looking at your application apart from maybe consuming it. Getting it to this next point where it's shippable, and you're going to have to, I've done this, where you're then trying to explain what on earth your application is doing. If you haven't named things correctly, you're just making your life so difficult. So for the sake of 5 seconds, please just do it. So here's a really bad example. I think you'll really like it. So yeah, gallery 1, label 5, label 4, label 3. So I built this however many months ago for a certifications tracker. I have no idea what that actually means. No idea, and I'm sure neither of you do either, right? Clear collect, a collection. Great, I know what it is. No one else is going to, yeah? Just do this, yeah? So gal is your cert created on, cert tech area. Anyone who comes in and reads this code is going to know what it's doing. Simple as that, okay? So finally, right, I'm going to review some of the concepts that we've gone over in our whistle-stop tour. So in terms of the design phase, this is where I'm just saying, do not just rush in and start building, yeah? It's the most magical thing about the Power Platform that we can do that. However, again, when you're building an application for more than just one person, you have to consider things like security. You have to consider what the data flow of the application. You have to consider how it looks, not just to your own aesthetic, to consider accessibility, as Donna was very well pointing out earlier. All of these kind of things that if you just go in and start chucking things around, you're just making very, very muddy waters for yourselves. Yeah? Now, the next stage, and even if you're working in an environment where you don't necessarily have someone who's fantastically knowledgeable in the Power Platform, I will ask you sort of like, why are you setting a local variable there when you could be doing X, Y, and Z? However, the power of someone else just looking at what you've done, we call it talk to the teddy, and just literally talk through your solution, the power of actually doing that and not being this lone wolf and kind of, and it's again, working with people who've come from that background and they're used to being heads down, it's kind of like, yeah, they get it to work eventually. However, the power of just going and sitting down with someone who just sort of says, have you thought about doing it this way? Okay, it's mega, mega simple, but it will just make your life so much easier. Naming convention, as we said, that is going to be the colour of gold, butter and ripe lemons. And formatting and commenting, thinking about the next developer. Yeah, as I said, if it just about makes sense to you in real time, fantastic. If you think about even, and I've done this before I kind of, I've learned all this stuff the hard way, by the way. This isn't just kind of like inbuilt knowledge that's happened. So, for example, opening up an application that I built for one of my examinations and looking at what on earth it was doing, absolutely no idea. And again, someone else coming and looking at that wouldn't have an idea as well. Yeah? So thinking about your formatting and your commenting is going to make your life a lot easier. So, just going to kind of bring this back to striking a balance, and I'd be interested to have some of your thoughts on this. So, naturally, I think Microsoft obviously have done a fantastic job of explaining to everyone how easy it is to get into the Power Platform, right? I'm sure we see, app in a day, connect up to an Excel list, off you go and build an enterprise level application, yeah? We all know it's not quite as simple as that. But my sort of open question to the group here is like, how do we keep instilling people to have a go? So that like, if I say to average Joe on the street, great, how do you fancy a career in .NET development? Probably going to have a little bit of a thought about it, right? Okay, if you bring them in and start saying, okay, this is the sort of syntax of PowerFX, it might be similar to what you've done in Excel. You can start moving the controls around, what you see is what you get. Okay, yeah, I get that. And I was listening to a session with Keith and hearing about how he brought in citizen development into Ariba, for example, right? You hear about people from all these different types of backgrounds getting involved in the platform. Now, probably at that point, at the very point of inception, if I start coming in and talk about naming convention to them, probably not really going to enhance their journey in as a citizen developer. But the balance of where we are on our journey, and my sort of suggestion on this is that, yes, we might have got to a point with where we're creating really interesting applications, we're happy with our collections, we're happy with how we're modeling our data, but that next step of making something that's professional, I say that sort of quote unquote professional, because a lot of people who are doing professional level development aren't doing it professionally, but that next step, I'm seeing it purely as just a sort of next stage in our journey. Yeah. So even if we sat our PL100, our PL200, and we're even looking into sort of the more sort of like advanced topics of citizen development, is then sort of thinking, right, business value, who's my solution for? Okay, I'm going to go and co-create that solution with them, I'm going to design it properly, I'm going to think about the flow of the data within that application, I'm going to name everything correctly, think about the developer after you, not think about yourself. And then I think we can answer dear Ben's question, so if we go all the way back. All the way back. Oh, I thought it would be way more rapid, excuse me. Right. So, again, this kind of, for me, this idea of the cost of maintenance is brushed under the carpet. And naturally it is brushed under the carpet. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of apps in your environment, no idea how any of them work, yeah? That is obviously something that we want to avoid. But in terms of the steps that we've spoken about, in terms of like bringing up our naming convention, making sure we're not, as Dave was saying, like tweeting out our opportunities left, right, and centre, is that this problem is not the problem of the platform, right? This is the problem of how we are using the platform, and it's, as Matt said, it was a very powerful platform without any meaning for any silliness. But this next step of how we then go out and engage people and use this platform with system developers is just another step on top of that engagement. So, yeah, my answer to that open question is yes, we can instill ourselves with those. Just because we're not coding in C# and we're not coding in JavaScript and we're writing our solutions in PowerFX, doesn't mean we get a free ride with all of the other practices in ALM and all of that sort of good stuff. Yeah? So, we have gone over 20 minutes. So until they chuck us out, so I'm more than happy to take any questions, have a chat about it or anything. So I'll open up the floor to you guys. If we had a question,
How would you go about, would you use external documentation? Would you try and encourage people to try and do that? So like a PowerPoint describe
Sorry?
external documentation. Would you try
Yes.
and encourage your system to do an external PowerPoint describing screens and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think to be honest, my starting point would be anything they have access to.
Yeah, that's
Anything they've got access to. Like obviously, in an ideal world, we'd be having our sort of like everything documented however we want to in DevOps or whatever. But as a starting point, just anything that we can hold centrally that people have access to. But also starting with that documentation.
What I find confusing is that obviously it's not a linear process in Power Apps and Canvas apps, whereas obviously Power Automate it's quite easy to see it starts here, then clearly implements logic. Sometimes we're struggling with debugging stuff with other people because there might be an non-visible property that triggers something here and the control also applies itself, and it's that non-linear approach I think we find quite difficult. I don't think you've got any ways to try and interrogate code.
So you can do, so if you unpack the Power App itself with the into Visual Studio Code, you can start sort of, in terms of the linear process of it, that's why I think the data flow is really, really important.
Yeah.
And again, it's not exactly the sexy end of development, is it? Like kind of like going, oh, well now on the on-app to start development, I'm now going to call this collection.
Yeah.
But again, for sort of any debugging, that kind of documentation will really, really, really help.
Yeah.
And they sort of tend to
Just on the debugging thing, there's now the new monitor functionality.
Yeah, we did as well, yeah.
It'll show you every step that it's gone through.
Yeah, that's
so at least point you roughly in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Guys, I'm going to take the deafening silence as a sign to round off. But thanks ever so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all.
Cheers.